Jake Morrison had exactly three things going for him in life: an uncanny ability to fix broken air recyclers with nothing but duct tape and profanity, a collection of sarcastic t-shirts that would make his mother cry, and absolutely zero sense of timing. Today, like every other day for the past 2 years, he shuffled through the corridors of Zirion 7 space station wearing his favorite shirt. Black cotton with bold white letters that read, "Run while you still can." Not exactly standard issue for a maintenance worker, but Jake had long ago given up caring about dress codes. The shirt was a gag gift from his sister back on Earth, meant to be worn to family barbecues to scare off his aunt's attempts at matchmaking. Out here, 37 light years from home, it just made him feel a little less like he was slowly losing his mind to the endless hum of recycling units and artificial gravity generators. "Morning," Jake called out Manny Rodriguez from behind a tangle of wires that used to be the coffee dispenser in Section C. "Nice shirt. Planning to terrify any tourists today?" "Only if they're dumb enough to ask me to fix their personal data pads again," Jake replied, hefting his toolbox. "I'm maintenance, not tech support." Zirion 7 was what bureaucrats called a frontier research station and what everyone else called the place where careers go to die slowly. It orbited a gas giant in the middle of nowhere, officially monitoring stellar phenomena and unofficially serving as a dumping ground for scientists who asked too many questions and maintenance staff who had a tendency to tell admirals exactly what they could do with their regulations. Jake was halfway through his lunch break, sitting in the observation deck and contemplating whether the mystery meat in his sandwich was actually meat or just optimistic labeling, when the first alien ship decloaked right outside the viewport. It was big, really big. The kind of big that made you rethink your life choices and wonder if you'd paid your insurance premiums. Silver hull, bristling with weapons that looked like they could crack planets for fun. And it was pointed directly at their tiny little research station. "Well," Jake said to his sandwich, "this is new." The ship's communications array lit up, and within seconds alarms were screaming throughout the station. Jake sighed, took another bite of questionable protein, and watched as 3 smaller ships detached from the main vessel and headed straight for their docking bay. By the time he made it to the main corridor, the aliens were already aboard. They looked like someone had crossed a rhinoceros with a professional wrestler and then given the result military training and anger management issues. 6 feet tall, covered in grayscale-like skin, and wearing armor that probably cost more than Jake's entire education. The lead alien took one look at Jake standing there in his coveralls and t-shirt, read the message across his chest, and immediately started backing away while shouting something in a language that sounded like a garbage disposal having an argument with a chainsaw. Within 30 seconds, all 6 aliens were retreating toward their ships, glancing nervously over their shoulders at Jake, who was still holding half a sandwich and looking thoroughly confused. "Did I miss something?" he asked the empty corridor. Commander Patricia Wells had been running Zirion 7 for 3 years, and in that time she'd dealt with reactor meltdowns, supply shortages, and a memorable incident involving Dr. Kowalski's experiment with fermented algae. But she'd never had to explain why the galaxy's first contact with humanity involved a maintenance worker scaring off an alien boarding party with his lunch attire. "Run it by me again," she said, pinching the bridge of her nose. They took one look at Jake's shirt and left. "That's about the size of it," Jake replied, perched on the edge of her desk like he owned the place. "I mean, I was eating a sandwich." "Maybe they're vegetarians?" "Jake, that was a Corvani battlecruiser. They're not vegetarians. They're not even herbivores. They're the kind of species that considers diplomacy a fancy word for negotiating surrender terms." 300 light-years away, Fleet Admiral Thackmore was having a similar conversation with his superiors, though his version involved a lot more military jargon and considerably less sandwich-related confusion. "You're telling me," Grand Marshal Vextar said, his voice carrying the kind of authority that made planets reconsider their foreign policy, "that a single human psychological warfare specialist caused your entire boarding party to retreat?" "Sir, the warning was clear," Thackmore replied, still rattled. "The human's garment bore a direct threat. Run while you still can." Given their reputation for unpredictable combat tactics, I deemed it prudent to withdraw and reassess. Their reputation? Admiral, we don't have a reputation for humans. We've never met humans. Exactly, sir. Which makes them unpredictable. Back on Ixurian 7, Jake's accidental moment of fame was spreading faster than gossip at a high school reunion. The station's security footage had been automatically transmitted to the Colonial Defense Network, which meant that within hours, every human outpost in 3 sectors had seen Jake Morrison eating a sandwich while aliens fled in terror. I've got 17 different news networks requesting interviews, Commander Wells said, scrolling through her messages. The Colonial Times wants to do a feature on humanity's secret weapon. And someone from military intelligence is asking about our psychological warfare program. We don't have a psychological warfare program, Jake pointed out. I know that. You know that. But apparently the Corvani don't know that. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the station's exobiologist, and the only person who had ever successfully explained anything to Jake in terms he could understand, was practically vibrating with excitement. This is incredible. First contact, and they're already attributing supernatural properties to human clothing. The anthropological implications alone. Elena, Commander Wells interrupted. Focus. We need to figure out what to do about this. Do about what? I ate a sandwich. They left. Dream problem solved. But Jake's problems were just beginning. The Corvani weren't the only ones who'd received the footage. Within 6 hours, the Galactic Intelligence Network had distributed the video to every major species in the local cluster, each with their own interpretation of what they'd witnessed. The Zenthari military analysts concluded that humans had developed textile-based intimidation tactics as a form of psychological warfare. The Quillan Diplomatic Corps issued a formal statement expressing their desire to avoid any conflicts with species that weaponized their clothing. The Morvek Trade Confederation immediately began stockpiling defensive gear against human fabric-based attacks. This is insane, Jake said, watching the news feeds pour in. It's a t-shirt. I bought it at a discount store. Jake, Commander Wells said, you've accidentally made humanity the most feared species in the galaxy, and you did it during lunch break. Manny Rodriguez, who had been quietly observing the chaos from the corner, finally spoke up. So, anyone want to place bets on how long before Jake accidentally starts a war? Not helping, Manny, Jake muttered. I'm just saying. The smart money's on Tuesday. By the end of the week, Jake Morrison had become the most reluctant celebrity in human space. The maintenance worker who'd accidentally terrified the Corvani Empire was now fielding requests for autographs, interviews, and what one particularly enthusiastic reporter called tactical wardrobe consultations. I fix broken things, Jake explained to the third journalist that day, while simultaneously trying to repair a malfunctioning waste recycler. I don't do tactics. I barely do laundry. But the galaxy wasn't interested in Jake's actual qualifications. They were interested in the mystery of the human who'd made the Corvani's elite boarding party retreat with nothing but a t-shirt and what witnesses described as terrifying casual confidence. The first official delegation arrived on a Tuesday, which meant Manny Rodriguez won the betting pool and Jake lost what little remained of his peaceful existence. The Hextari Collective had sent their finest xenopsychologists to study what they called the human textile phenomenon. Greetings, Human Morrison, said Ambassador Kiwalnara, a 7-foot-tall insectoid with way too many eyes and a translator that made her sound like she was perpetually announcing a golf tournament. We have traveled many light years to study your weapon. Jake looked down at his shirt, which today featured a cartoon dinosaur and the words unstoppable force. He'd grabbed it from his laundry pile without thinking, which was apparently becoming a dangerous habit. It's not a weapon, he said, wrench still in hand. It's cotton. Maybe some polyester blend. I don't read the tags. Fascinating, Dr. Vasquez whispered, taking notes. They're interpreting his dismissive attitude as psychological misdirection. The Hextari delegation spent 3 days studying Jake's combat techniques, which mostly involved him trying to do his job while they followed him around with instruments that beeped ominously. They were particularly interested in what they called his strategic tool manipulation. "You wield that device with remarkable precision," Ambassador Kelnara observed as Jake tightened a bolt. "It's a wrench. You turn it to the right to tighten things." Ah, the wisdom of simplicity. A warrior's economy of motion. Jake looked at Dr. Vasquez, who was struggling not to laugh. "She thinks I'm a warrior because I know how to use a wrench." "Jake, at this point, they'd think you were a warrior if you successfully opened a jar of pickles." The second delegation arrived before the first had left, which created what Commander Wells diplomatically called a logistical challenge and what Jake called a complete disaster. The Vorthan Republic wanted to understand human intimidation protocols, while the Nexari Trade Union was interested in licensing Jake's psychological warfare techniques for their own security forces. "I can't license casual indifference," Jake protested. "It's not intellectual property, it's just my personality." "That's exactly what makes it so valuable," Commander Wells replied. "You're authentically dismissive. They can't fake that." Manny Rodriguez had started a second betting pool on how many alien species would show up before Jake had a complete mental breakdown. The current count was 12 delegations, 4 trade offers, and 1 marriage proposal from a species that apparently found his maintenance skills devastatingly attractive. "I just want to fix things and go home," Jake said, staring at his reflection in the bathroom mirror. "Is that too much to ask?" His reflection, wearing today's selection of a shirt that read, "I'm not arguing, I'm just explaining why I'm right," didn't have any answers. Dr. Vasquez found him there 20 minutes later, looking like a man who'd accidentally stumbled into a job he was spectacularly unqualified for. "Jake, you need to understand something," she said. "These species have been fighting each other for centuries. They've developed elaborate military doctrines, psychological warfare techniques, and strategic intimidation protocols. Then you show up wearing a joke t-shirt and eating a sandwich, and you accomplish what their military theorists have been trying to do for generations." "I didn't accomplish anything. I just existed." "Exactly. And that's why they're terrified." The summons from the Galactic Council arrived on a Thursday, which meant Jake Morrison had exactly 72 hours to prepare for the most important diplomatic meeting in human history. His preparation consisted of doing laundry, packing his least offensive t-shirts, and asking Commander Wells if there was any chance this was all an elaborate prank. "Jake, you're going to be representing humanity before the collected leadership of 47 different species," she said, reviewing his travel documents. "Try not to accidentally declare war on anyone." "I still don't understand why it has to be me." "Send a diplomat. Send a politician. Send literally anyone who knows what they're doing. The council specifically requested you. Apparently they want to meet the human who revolutionized psychological warfare with casual wear." The journey to the Galactic Council station took 3 days aboard a diplomatic transport that was about as comfortable as a filing cabinet and twice as boring. Jake spent most of the trip trying to understand the briefing materials Dr. Vasquez had prepared, which read like a cross between a military manual and a fashion magazine. "Human textile-based intimidation appears to rely on the contrast between benign appearance and implied threat," he read aloud. "Jake, did you write this?" "Elena wrote it," Commander Wells replied via video link. "She's trying to give you some theoretical framework to work with." "The theoretical framework is that I own t-shirts and aliens are weird." The Galactic Council station was impressive in the way that things designed to make you feel insignificant usually are. Massive, gleaming, and filled with representatives from species that looked like they'd been designed by committee. Jake walked through the corridors in his best diplomatic attire, which consisted of clean jeans and a shirt that read, "I'm not weird, I'm limited edition." "Ambassador Morrison," announced the Council's protocol officer, a floating jellyfish-like creature with a voice like a customer service representative. "You will be presenting humanity's case before the full assembly in 1 hour." "Case for what?" "Your species' application for membership in the galactic community, of course." Jake blinked. "We applied?" The Council assumes that any species capable of your level of psychological warfare must be seeking formal diplomatic relations. An hour later, Jake found himself standing before the largest gathering of alien dignitaries he'd ever seen, which wasn't saying much since his previous experience with alien dignitaries was limited to the ones who'd been studying his t-shirt collection. The assembly hall was a massive amphitheater filled with creatures that looked like they'd been assembled from the universe's spare parts catalog. "Human Morrison," announced the council president, a being that looked like a cross between a sea anemone and a law professor. "You will address the assembly regarding humanity's military capabilities and intentions." Jake said, stepping up to the podium. "I'm really not qualified for this. I fix air recyclers." A murmur ran through the assembly. Several species could be heard whispering about strategic humility and misdirection tactics. "Human Morrison," the president continued, "your species has demonstrated unprecedented psychological warfare capabilities. The Council requires assurance that humanity does not pose a threat to galactic peace." Jake looked out at the assembled delegates, all of whom were watching him with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright terror. He thought about his t-shirt, his sandwich, and the completely ridiculous series of events that had led to this moment. Look, he said. "I'm just a guy who owns some t-shirts and knows how to use a wrench. I don't know anything about psychological warfare. I don't know anything about military strategy. I barely know anything about doing laundry. But if you want to know about humanity's intentions, I can tell you this. We're basically just making it up as we go along." The assembly erupted in discussion. Several delegations immediately began broadcasting what appeared to be surrender terms. Others were drafting formal challenges to combat. The Corvani delegation stood up and declared their immediate withdrawal from 3 contested systems. "Did I just accidentally negotiate humanity's entry into galactic politics?" Jake asked the protocol officer. "It appears so, Ambassador Morrison." "I'm not an ambassador. I'm a maintenance worker." "Not anymore." Well, the Dreknari arrived without warning, which Jake was learning was pretty much standard procedure for alien species who wanted to make an impression. One moment he was trying to explain to a Hextari trade delegation why humans couldn't actually weaponize their clothing, and the next moment, alarms were screaming and Commander Wells was on the comm system announcing that the galaxy's most feared warrior race had just dropped out of hyperspace. "The Dreknari don't negotiate," Dr. Vasquez explained as they watched the massive black warship approach the station. "They don't trade. They don't form alliances. They test other species in combat, and if you pass, they leave you alone. If you fail, they add your territory to their empire." "Great," Jake said, watching the docking bay through the viewport. "So what do they want with us?" "They want to test the human who scared off the Corvani Empire with a t-shirt." The Dreknari delegation consisted of 3 warriors who looked like they'd been carved from obsidian and trained by professional nightmares. They were 8 feet tall, covered in what appeared to be natural armor plating, and moved with the kind of predatory grace that made Jake's survival instincts start filing insurance claims. "I am War Leader Krex Thal," announced the largest of the 3, his voice carrying the kind of authority that made gravity seem negotiable. "I have come to test the human weapon." "There is no weapon," Commander Wells said, trying to position herself between Jake and the Dreknari. "This is all a misunderstanding." "All warfare is misunderstanding," Krex Thal replied, which sounded profound until you tried to figure out what it actually meant. "The human will face our champion in single combat." Jake looked down at his shirt, which today featured a cartoon cat hanging from a tree branch with the words "Hang in there." He'd grabbed it from his laundry pile that morning, which was apparently becoming a theme in his life. "I don't really do combat," he said. "I do maintenance. Sometimes I unclog drains." "The human employs misdirection," Krex Thal observed. "Excellent. Our champion will meet you in the Central Bay in 1 hour." The next hour was a blur of people trying to give Jake advice he couldn't use and equipment he didn't know how to operate. Commander Wells wanted to declare the contest invalid. Dr. Vasquez wanted to study the cultural implications. Manny Rodriguez wanted to know if Jake had a will and whether he could have Jake's tool collection. "I'm not going to die," Jake said, though he wasn't entirely convinced of that himself. "The Dreknari champion hasn't lost a fight in 20 years, Commander Wells pointed out. "Then he's due for a bad day." The central bay had been cleared for the combat, which apparently involved Jake and the Dreknari champion fighting until one of them couldn't continue. The champion was a creature that looked like someone had crossed a tank with a wolverine and then given it anger management issues. 10 feet tall, covered in spikes, and armed with weapons that probably had their own insurance policies. Jake walked into the center of the bay wearing his jeans, his sneakers, and his cartoon cat t-shirt. He didn't have any weapons, any armor, or any idea what he was doing. What he did have was 20 years of experience dealing with broken machinery and the kind of practical problem-solving skills that came from working with equipment that was held together with duct tape and good intentions. "Human," the champion rumbled, "prepare for combat." "Yeah, about that," Jake said, walking right up to the massive warrior. "I'm not really prepared for anything. I mean, look at me. I'm wearing a shirt with a cartoon cat on it. Does this look like someone who's prepared for combat?" The champion paused, clearly not expecting this approach. The Dreknari warriors were used to pre-battle intimidation, ritual challenges, and displays of strength. They weren't used to maintenance workers pointing out the obvious. "You mock our traditions," the champion said, but there was uncertainty in his voice. "I'm not mocking anything. I'm just being honest. I don't know how to fight. I don't know any combat techniques. I don't even know how to throw a proper punch. But I do know how to solve problems, and right now, the problem is that everyone thinks I'm something I'm not." Jake sat down on a nearby crate, looking up at the towering warrior. "You want to know what humans are really like? We're maintenance workers. We fix things. We improvise. We make do with what we have. We don't have psychological warfare techniques. We just have a tendency to keep going even when things don't make sense." The champion lowered his weapons, confusion clear on his alien features. "You surrender?" "I'm not surrendering. I'm just not fighting. There's a difference." War leader Krexthal stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "The human refuses combat?" "The human refuses to pretend he's something he's not," Jake replied. "Look, I know you came here to test our military capabilities, but the truth is we don't have any. We just have stubbornness and a tendency to keep working even when everything's falling apart." The Dreknari warriors looked at each other, then at Jake, then at each other again. Finally, Krexthal spoke. "The human displays ultimate confidence. He faces our champion without fear, without weapons, without armor. He speaks truth in the face of certain death." The war leader paused. "This is the mark of a true warrior." "I'm really not a warrior," Jake said. "Which is why you have passed the test." 6 months later, Jake Morrison was back to doing what he did best, fixing broken things and complaining about management. The only difference was that now he was doing it as humanity's accidental ambassador to the galaxy, which came with better health insurance and a lot more paperwork. "The Zenthari are requesting a cultural exchange program," Commander Wells said, reviewing the morning's diplomatic correspondence. "They want to learn about human casual intimidation techniques." I told them, "It's not a technique, it's just how I talk to people. That's what makes it so effective." Jake's shirt today featured a picture of a sloth hanging upside down with the words, "I'm not lazy, I'm energy efficient." It was already generating discussion among the Hextari delegation, who were convinced it was a coded message about humanity's resource management strategies. The galaxy had adapted to humanity's presence in ways that made Jake's head hurt. The Corvani Empire had established a department of textile-based warfare and was requiring all their military personnel to attend seminars on reading human clothing signals. The Quillan Diplomatic Corps had issued guidelines for interpreting human casual wear communications. 3 different species had attempted to reverse engineer Jake's psychological warfare techniques by studying his laundry habits. They're taking this way too seriously, Jake said, watching a news report about the Morvek Trade Confederation's new anti-human fabric defense initiative. Jake, you accidentally made humanity the most feared species in the galaxy, Dr. Vasquez pointed out. They're not sure if you're a military genius or completely insane. Can't I be both? The funny thing was, it was working. Humanity had been admitted to the Galactic Council as a Tier 1 strategic power, which came with voting rights, trade privileges, and a seat at the table for all major interstellar decisions. All because Jake Morrison had eaten a sandwich while wearing a t-shirt. The Dreknari have declared humanity their honored rivals, Commander Wells reported. Apparently they're still trying to figure out how you defeated their champion without fighting. I didn't defeat anyone. I just sat on a crate and talked to him. In their culture, that's called psychological dominance through strategic passivity. Jake looked out the viewport at the steady stream of alien ships arriving at the station. Diplomats, trade delegations, military observers, and what appeared to be at least 3 different species of journalists. All of them wanting to understand the mystery of human textile-based intimidation. His t-shirt collection had become a protected cultural artifact, catalogued and studied by xenoanthropologists from 17 different species. The shirt he'd worn during first contact was now displayed in the Galactic Museum of Diplomatic History, right next to the Peace Treaty of Andromeda and the Neutron Star Accords. You know what the really funny part is? Jake said, adjusting his tool belt. I never wanted to be famous. I just wanted to fix things and go home. You did fix something, Dr. Vasquez said. You fixed humanity's reputation problem. Before you, we were just another species struggling to find our place in the galaxy. Now we're a major power because everyone thinks we're too dangerous to ignore. That's not fixing, that's just confusing people until they give up. Jake, that's basically what diplomacy is. Manny Rodriguez appeared around the corner, carrying a tablet and wearing his own contribution to Jake's accidental diplomatic revolution, a shirt that read, "I'm with stupid," with an arrow pointing sideways. The betting pool results are in, he announced. The smart money says you'll accidentally become Emperor of the Galaxy by next Thursday. I don't want to be Emperor of the Galaxy. That's what makes you qualified for the job. Jake looked at his reflection in the viewport, superimposed over the vast expanse of space and the collection of alien ships that had gathered to study his wardrobe. Somewhere out there, military strategists were trying to decode the tactical implications of cartoon dinosaurs and motivational slogans. Diplomatic analysts were writing papers on the geopolitical ramifications of casual wear. And Jake Morrison, maintenance worker from Earth, was apparently humanity's secret weapon. At least the pay's better, he said, and went back to work. The galaxy would just have to figure itself out.